Alright, so I know what you're thinking. You saw the title of this video and you said, oh my god, underrated. I hear this word all the time. I'm so tired of hearing it. Hear me out. Hey, what's up, guys? Nick from the Lost River Drive-In here, and today I am going to give you guys 10 horror remakes that I find to be vastly underrated. And before you get already burnt out on hearing the word underrated and saying that people throw that word around way too much, when it comes to remakes, I feel like it is the perfect word because remakes almost always are just bound to be seen as inferior to their original. And that isn't always the case. But even if they are destined to be inferior to the original film, they can still be really good modern adaptations of a story we already really enjoyed. So the first one I want to talk about is Fright Night from 2011. Now, I have a good friend, you guys know Justin, Ryan1988, on YouTube that did not like this movie when he first saw it because he has such an affinity for the original film, like a lot of horror fans do. But as time went on, he grew to enjoy it more and really does dig it now as a whole. And I feel like this movie is a prime example of people being turned off from the beginning, thinking, why would you remake such a cult classic from the 80s? But over time starting to realize, well, it's actually pretty good. I mean, Anton Yelchin is great in this movie. Christopher Mintz-Plasse is great in this movie. Toni Collette's in this movie. Colin Farrell as Jerry Dandridge is great in this movie. This movie is a lot more fun and action-y than Fright Night from the 80s was. It definitely doesn't take itself very seriously. I also hear a lot of the complaints about the CGI and stuff like that, but I really think this movie is just like B-movie fun. Like, I don't think, when I watch this movie, I'm like, man, I'm having a blast from start to finish. The characters are not as good as the original iterations of the characters in any sense. Although, I don't know, this may be blasphemy, but I would probably take Farrell over Chris Sarandon. I'm just saying that. I know Chris Sarandon's a legend, but I think Farrell's amazing in this movie. But this movie is so fun. This movie is a remake that I feel like just got overlooked by so many people when it first came out because they thought the idea was sacrilege. But this is a really, really underrated, underappreciated remake. Next up is going to be Carrie from 2013. Now, you guys have heard me talk about this before when I've talked on live streams and whatnot about remakes. I really enjoy this movie, like a lot. And I think the reason I like this movie so much is because I really like Chloe Grace Moretz in the movie. I think she gives a great performance as the titular character of Carrie. And also you have Julianne Moore as her mom, who is just like totally unhinged and just not normal in any sense of the word. And she plays it so well, like so over the top. And I dig their relationship there. But also, the mean bitches in this movie. Let me tell you, I could not wait to see the comeuppance. I could not wait for the bullies to get theirs. When you have an antagonist, and the idea is for us to hate that antagonist, I better hate that antagonist so much to the point that when it's time for them to get theirs, I'm salivating, waiting for it. This movie, like a lot of remakes, it ditches some of the things from the original. It also utilizes a little bit too much of the things from the original at times. It can never really find that happy medium most of the time. And there's a lot of, visual effects, CGI at times that you're just kind of like, eh. But honestly, I think this is a super, super fun remake, and I think it is solely because of Chloe Grace Moretz's performance. I think she is phenomenal in the movie. So I gotta give a shout out to Carrie. Next up is going to be Pet Sematary from 2019. And I just want to go on record saying right now, people turned on this movie before they even saw it. One, because it was a remake to, in my opinion, one of the greatest horror movies ever made. I absolutely adore that original film. But two, the twists were spoiled in the trailer. And that's not the movie's fault. That is the marketing department's fault solely. And I don't understand why they would do that. But if you kind of take all that, put it away, say you never watched the trailer, even if you did, and say that, okay, I love the original, but I am open to the idea of them doing a retelling of that story, and maybe it'll be decent. It is decent. Okay, there's a few things in this movie that never really go anywhere, that kind of piss you off, that lead you to think that you're going to get more than we had so far up to this point. The mentioning of the Wendigo and even almost, seeing something in the distance. and the kids with the masks and stuff with doing like almost like procession, but we don't really get more of that. Having said that, though, it's really good. Like, I think the cast is really good in this movie. I really like Amy Seimetz. I really like Jason Clarke. The little kid that played Gage was just adorable, and he looked a lot like, Gage from the original movie. So I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. But the girl, I've got to give it up for the little girl that played the main role in this movie. She is awesome. She is just, when she comes back reanimated, oh my God. I mean, you're talking about like, I could not believe this was a child actor. And I've said this many times. We have talked so many times over the years about being weary about child actors in horror movies. Those times have changed. Nowadays, most of the time, these child actors are just damn good. We have to accept that this isn't the 80s anymore. A lot of these child actors really hone their craft at a young age. She is phenomenal in the movie. Like a lot of remakes, a lot of the iterations, again, they're not as strong. John Lithgow is not as good, obviously, as Judd, but he's awesome. I've got to say, I really do like John Lithgow. They do it a little bit differently, and I like his portrayal, though not the same. Jason Clarke is not as good, but I will say Amy Seimetz is definitely the better Rachel, and I don't care what anybody says. Zelda in this movie, not as effective. So a lot of the beats they try to hit on from the original Pascal, they're not as good, but they're not bad. They're just like, it doesn't affect me the same way the original does. But this movie does enough new stuff and kind of pulls the wool over your eyes a little bit without that damn trailer that you gotta respect them for doing something a little bit new and also just being a watchable, enjoyable time. It's not great, it's not better than the original, but it's solid. Now, this one is one I will find myself dying on any hill for as long as I live, and that is Black Christmas 2006. 2006. Okay, let's get that out of the way first. Look, by no means is this movie better than the original. The original Black Christmas is my second favorite holiday horror film of all time, with Halloween being the only holiday-centric horror movie that I would put above Black Christmas. Black Christmas is a seminal classic. It's a masterpiece. But if you're going to remake that movie 30 years later, I think that the thought process they had of going, let's do this a little bit more over the top, way less serious, more camp, more fun, it was the right impulse to have. Look, this movie's dripping in atmosphere. It is a blast from start to finish. It is gore-filled. It is just, you watch this movie and it feels so Christmassy. It's the perfect movie to put on around that time of year. It is so over the top at some points you're just like, Jesus, what am I watching? And I kind of love that about it. And it just does not take itself seriously at all. It is here to gross you out. It is here to be a kind of just nonsensical thrill ride from start to finish. And the movie achieves that in spades. I mean, you are hard-pressed to find a Christmas-themed movie, not just horror movie, with better atmosphere than this movie. So by no means do I put this on the level of the original, but it is damn underappreciated, and I am not going to stand for it. The next one up is the first one on this list that I actually would say is better than any previous interpretation. And that is solely because I'm not a huge fan of the old school black and white Universal monster movies. I know, sue me. And that is The Invisible Man from 2020. Look, I love this movie. Like, I think this movie is awesome, like from start to finish. But when it comes to this movie, like, I unfortunately always remember it came out right before the lockdowns happened, and it was actually the first movie I saw the first week that everything was shut down, because it came to VOD, and I was like, oh cool, I can watch it at home. And I did, and I loved it the first time I saw it. Again, I'm not even really well versed in a lot of the old school Universal monster movies. Obviously I've seen like Frankenstein and Dracula and stuff like that, but I don't have a knowledge like some people do. So, and shout out my buddy Ryan Falzone. He is very, very into that era of film, and maybe I am missing out. I don't know. I've just never really dove into it, but I love this movie, and I think it's purely because of the performances and what the tone they go for here. They're not going horror here. This is more of a thriller. This is more of a psychological thriller and almost like a mystery. And it is so suspenseful at times. It is beautifully shot. Lee Wanell is just, this was the movie for me with him that I was like, you can be a damn good director. You take the reins with Insidious Chapter 3 and some of the Saw movies, not directing them, but having a more hands-on approach in the later movies. And I was never so big into a lot of those efforts of his, but The Invisible Man is the first movie that he's done, director, writer, that I was like, this dude's got it. Like, he is clearly a student of James Wan, and I want to see more from him, and I still do. But Elizabeth Moss absolutely carries this movie. She is brilliant. She makes the movie. Without her and the performance she gives, it is probably nowhere near as good as it is. But The Invisible Man is a damn good movie. Now, the next one is also one that I would say is better than the original. So this could have gone on that list, but honestly, some of these just come to mind as I'm talking about it. I don't write notes down, guys. These just kind of come as I go. So this is another one that's kind of, I looked at my shelf and I was like, oh, this one, of course. Now, some people would say this is blasphemy. I don't care. Maniac with Elijah Wood. Okay, let me just tell you guys, I hadn't watched the original in a long time. I saw it when I was a teenager and I thought it was fine for what it was. Product of its time. It is what it is. Whatever. Out of sight, out of mind. I watched this remake and I was like, oh my God. And I blind bought it because I hadn't seen it. I had never seen it. And I just watched it a year or so ago and I loved this movie. The score is awesome. The way it almost plays like found footage, but it's really just because it's like POV, which I think is just so damn cool. I think that the acting in this movie, the gore, a lot of its practical effects too, is just fantastic. I think that there's genuine suspense. I love the whole opening sequence. I think that was a great way to, open this movie. And I think that the climax just kind of goes from 0 to 100 real quick. And you don't know what's real and what isn't, and how did this happen and how did that happen. And I kind of love that about this movie. It is just so insanely well crafted. It is clearly it has that European touch to it, and I absolutely love that, and that's credit to the filmmaker. I love this movie. I think this movie's fantastic. I do think it's better than the first one, the original one. Yeah, if you have not seen Maniac with Elijah Wood, get on it. Next up is one that I don't know if I've put on a list before. Maybe I have, and I'm just totally missing it. But even if I have, I'm just going to talk about it again because I do think it's severely underrated. And that's House on Haunted Hill. Look, The Legend of Hill House and all those original iterations. Again, we're talking older movies that even if I have seen them, it's been a long time. I have seen the original. I have. It's been a very long time. I actually used to own it on DVD. I think it was in one of those you go to Walgreens or whatever, and they had like 4 movies and like a Terror 4-pack, and it was all these older black and white horror movies. So I have seen it. I do remember it. Obviously, very much a product of its time, so there's no nostalgia there for me whatsoever. But House on Haunted Hill rocks. It kicks some serious ass. The movie's got a great cast, a killer location. It is, at times, just such a mind fuck at times, and I love that. Like, I love that about this movie. There's things about it that haven't aged as well. Like, I'm specifically thinking about the third act with the whole like mass of souls that's like all black. Does not look good whatsoever. But again, certain things, like I've said many times with older movies, if a product of its time, you can't really hold it against a movie. You can go like, oh, I wish that were a little bit better, but I'm not going to dock the movie for it. But the movie's awesome. It's got a killer soundtrack and score, killer set pieces, great deaths, great imagery. It really makes you like watching this movie. I remember from the first time I ever saw this movie, I was just like thinking about how like crazy it would be to be down in those basement, that basement and get lost and have all the weird shit happening that happens down there. Like, that terrified me, absolutely terrified me. And being trapped in that building, dude, it's awesome. This movie is awesome. I could go on all day about it. House on Haunted Hill for sure. Next up is going to be one that I really don't hear people talk about a lot when they talk about underrated horror remakes, and I'm just going to throw my hat in the ring here and hopefully I don't get crucified for it. The Amityville Horror. I mean, without a doubt, 100%. This movie scared the shit out of me the first time I saw it. My mom rented this movie when it came out. I was like 11 or 12. We watched it as a family because, family bonding with horror movies. It's just what we did. And I guess I have her to thank for this. And I remember the scene where the youngest son is in the bathroom in the middle of the night to go pee. And we get the shot of him looking in the mirror and that dead kid is right next to him with that shit coming out of his mouth. And I jumped. I was like, no effing way. It was awesome. Okay. This movie, sometimes I feel like it's better than the original because more happens and I think there's stronger performances, but I don't know. Like I don't know, so I'm not going to make that declaration right now. But I will say this movie is super underrated. I think it's super well acted. I was also scarred by the scene where Jodie put the babysitter's finger in the hole in her head. Like, dude, gross. I loved the exploration of like the origin of the house itself and like the people that died there and the dude that was responsible for all of it, and then like really getting to see more of the descent into madness with the dad played by Ryan Reynolds, who's awesome, and you know I love Ryan Reynolds. So like it's just awesome. The movie rules. It kicks ass. It's got some really cool like freaky imagery. There's some suspenseful moments. A lot more happens than in the original movie. So I don't know where I stand with it, ranking it next to that one, but it is damn sure underrated, and I'm going to put that out there. Next up is going to be House of Wax from 2005, and I had a really interesting relationship with this movie. I remember when I first saw this movie, I enjoyed it, like I had a fun time, and then as years went on, I was like, that movie is so dumb. Like, why does that even exist? Paris Hilton, ugh, God, pass. And then after I got out of my teenage years, I started to appreciate it again, and I really, really have a good time with this movie. Sometimes I feel like expectations can lead you down a path that is just unfair to a movie. Sometimes a movie is spelling out clearly to you what it is. And if you don't get that and you can't accept that, that's on you. And I feel like I fell victim to that. But now I don't. And what it spells out to you is we're not meant to be taken super seriously, okay? There's a giant house made of wax with a bunch of corpses under all the wax figures, a creepy ass family that kill people, and build wax sculptures with your body in this like desolate, rundown wax town. That's really all it is. Like, it's not super big brained. It's not supposed to be terrifying. It is like a mid 2000s slasher movie to a T. And it absolutely delivers. No, I didn't like the idea of Paris Hilton being in this movie when this movie first came out. And I was like, God damn, she can't act. This is fucking horrible. But like going back on it now, I'm like, I think she does fine. And also, like, I think you're supposed to not like her, which makes her death scene like iconic. It is absolutely iconic. This movie's a blast. It's super, super fun. I love the setting. I love the effects and the gore. I love a lot about this movie. I even love when everything melts and it's this whole like fucking crazy, avalanche of fucking wax. It's just awesome. This movie kicks ass. It's super fun. And the last one that's underrated, I think, is Nightmare on Elm Street 2010. I've said it a lot of times. I'm not going to say it anymore. You guys are going to give me shit for it, but it's not bad. It's not terrible. Leave it alone. Bye. So yeah, guys, that's 10 underrated horror remakes that I love, and I think inarguably, I think all of them are underrated. I really, really do. Maybe not Maniac or whatever, but like I feel like mainstream audiences don't talk about a lot of these movies a lot, or they did for a little bit and they came and went, or they just never really got their heyday because people didn't want to accept that these movies were getting remade. And you look back on these and a lot of people will say, "Oh, this is fucking terrible," but like I think all 10 of these movies I mentioned are solid ass movies for their own reasons. And I really want people to start to appreciate and like them more, like I do, because I think there's a lot there in these movies and I think they're a fun time. But I want you guys to comment down below and let me know if you agree with these 10. Do you have more that you think are underrated? Not necessarily better than their predecessor, but underrated. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Please leave a like on this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and there is a spider, so I'm gonna have to get up and kill that. So this is Nick at the Lost River Drive-In, and I am pulling out.